Have you ever wondered why some people seem to choose solitude over connection again and again? Why, no matter how many opportunities for companionship appear, they retreat quietly back into themselves? Most of us assume they're just introverts, or maybe they're antisocial. But what if I told you that the truth is far more profound and far darker? What if those people who always stay alone are not simply avoiding others, but are actually confronting something that most of us spend our lives running from? Let me tell you a story. Imagine you're walking through a dense forest alone. There's no trail, no signs, just you and the raw presence of nature. At first, it's peaceful, but then the silence grows heavy. Every step deeper into the woods feels like a step deeper into yourself. And then it hits you. Solitude isn't just the absence of people. It's the presence of something else, something unseen, something real. This is what those who stay alone often discover. Not just loneliness, but truth. And not everyone is ready for that. You see, in philosophical terms, solitude is not a state of being alone. It's a confrontation with the self. And most people don't want that. They think they do. They say they want to find themselves, but when they're finally alone, they panic. They reach for their phones, the TV, the background noise of society. Because when the distractions fall away, all that's left is the raw, unfiltered mirror of existence. The people who always stay alone, they've stared into that mirror, and many of them have seen what lies behind it. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That's the haunting truth. Some people retreat into solitude not because they despise others, but because they've spent too long trying to be understood in a world that doesn't listen. They've tried to speak their truth, and were met with blank stares, shallow responses, or worse, ridicule. So they go inward, not as an escape, but as a return. A return to the only place where they can hear the voice that truly matters, their own. But here's where it gets more complex. The people who always stay alone don't just know themselves, they often know you better than you'd expect. Because in their silence, they observe. In their solitude, they reflect. They watch the world from a distance, not with judgment, but with piercing clarity. And that clarity can be both a gift and a curse. They see through the masks, the small talk, the ego games. And once you see that clearly, it's hard to go back, hard to pretend, hard to engage in a world that often feels like it's spinning just to avoid the very stillness they live in. But let me ask you something challenging. If you are completely alone for a month, no phone, no books, no internet, no distractions, what would you find? What thoughts would rise to the surface? What regrets? What fears? What forgotten dreams? Most people imagine that kind of solitude would drive them insane, but maybe that's the point. Maybe a kind of insanity needs to surface before we can find real clarity. Maybe the madness we fear in solitude is actually the suppressed noise of a life lived too far from authenticity. And maybe those who always stay alone, they've already passed through that fire. And what's on the other side is not madness, but something else, presence. But let's get even deeper. There's this idea in existential philosophy that we are fundamentally alone. Not in a depressing way, but in a foundational way. No one can live your life for you. No one can think your thoughts, face your death, or carry your consciousness. And the people who always stay alone, they know this. They've stopped pretending that connection can erase existential solitude. They've stopped demanding that another human being complete them. And not because they don't want love, many of them do. But they've realized that unless you've made peace with your own aloneness, any relationship is just a distraction, a temporary bandage over a metaphysical wound. This is where the dark truth really hits. Some people stay alone because they've been to the bottom of themselves. They've sat in silence long enough to see their own shadow, their own mortality, their own insignificance in the cosmic scale of things. And in that darkness, they found something most people avoid their entire lives: freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever they want, but the freedom from needing to be anything at all, from chasing validation, from performing, from fitting in. They don't need to be seen because they've already seen themselves. And that's a kind of liberation society doesn't understand. But here's the twist: solitude isn't always healthy. Some people stay alone not because they've transcended the world, but because the world broke them. They've been hurt, rejected, abandoned, and they've built walls instead of bridges. They've confused isolation with safety, and this is the danger. Solitude can become a prison just as easily as it can become a temple. The same aloneness that can lead to enlightenment can also lead to despair. So how do we know the difference? That's the question we have to sit with. Because the truth is, solitude will reveal you. If you enter it with fear, you'll meet your demons. If you enter it with curiosity, you'll meet your soul. The people who always stay alone, some of them are sages, others are survivors, some are hiding, others are healing. But they all share one thing in common: they've stepped off the well-trodden path and into the unknown terrain of the self. And whether they'll ever return is up to them, and to what the world shows them when they do. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you're someone who feels that same pull toward solitude. Maybe you're tired of shallow conversations, tired of pretending, tired of being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. Maybe you've been called weird or quiet or too intense. But maybe, just maybe, you're not broken. Maybe you're just listening to a frequency that most people have forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, that frequency is trying to lead you somewhere real. The dark truth about people who always stay alone is not that they're lost. It's that they've gone deeper than most are willing to go. And in that depth, they found questions that society doesn't want to ask. Questions like, what if everything I thought I needed was just a distraction from what I truly am? What if silence is not empty, but full of truths that words can't touch? What if the real journey isn't outward, but inward? And now I'll ask you, could you walk that path? Could you sit in a room alone and be completely at peace? Could you face your inner world without flinching? If not, what are you really afraid of finding? Because maybe, just maybe, that fear is the doorway. And the people who always stay alone, they've already stepped through it. We live in a world obsessed with connection, constant, rapid-fire, digital connection. But isn't it strange that, with all the friends, followers, and feeds, people feel more lost than ever, more fragmented, more unsure of who they are? That's the paradox no one wants to talk about. The more we surround ourselves with noise, the more we lose ourselves in it. And those who always stay alone, they've unplugged from that constant stream. Not because they hate people, but because they've realized something that most of us are too distracted to consider, that the self is not discovered in the presence of others, it is discovered in their absence. It's easy to define yourself by roles: friend, employee, partner, influencer, student. But what happens when you strip all of that away? When there's no one left to impress, no narrative to maintain, no role to play? That's when something terrifying and beautiful begins to emerge. You start to realize that most of what you called you was actually just a reflection of other people's expectations. The people who always stay alone have seen this. They've sat in the silence long enough to peel away the layers, one by one. And what they found wasn't always pretty. It might have been grief, shame, insecurity, or even rage. But underneath all of it, they often found something else, something solid, something real. Something that didn't need a name or validation, just presence. This is the essence of the Inward Odyssey. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Solitude becomes the crucible for this remembering. Without it, we live according to scripts we never wrote, chasing careers we don't care about, relationships that numb us, lifestyles that drain us. But in solitude, the script is burned, and from the ashes, something original can rise. This is why some people stay alone for years, not because they've given up on life, but because they're finally living it on their own terms. And that takes time. It takes silence. It takes a kind of courage that can't be measured by followers or likes. But solitude is not always peaceful. In fact, the beginning of the inward journey is usually marked by chaos. You don't just sit in silence and find peace. You sit in silence and find yourself. And that includes everything you've buried, the trauma you minimized, the dreams you abandoned, the fears you pretended didn't exist. This is the real reason so few people choose solitude. It demands a reckoning. It forces you to confront your life not as it appears on the outside, but as it feels on the inside. And that's brutal. But it's also the only way to real freedom. Because if you never face your inner world, you'll always be a prisoner of the outer one. So here's the question: how well do you really know yourself? I'm not asking if you know your personality type, your goals, your favorite music. I'm asking if you know who you are when there's nothing left to prove, when no one is watching, when the masks fall off and the spotlight fades. Too many people are afraid of that version of themselves, but the people who stay alone, they've met that version. And while the rest of us are busy curating identities, they are cultivating essence. That's the Inward Odyssey, and it's not glamorous, it's not shareable, and it's not shareable, and it's not quick. But it just might be the only path that leads to truth. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. We often treat the two as interchangeable, but they couldn't be more different. Loneliness is a hunger, a longing for connection, for understanding, for someone to see you. It's a void that aches, but aloneness, real aloneness, is not emptiness. It's fullness. It's standing in the center of your own presence and realizing you are enough. The people who always stay alone have discovered this, often through pain. Yes, they may have felt lonely at first, even crushed by the weight of it. But over time, they realized something radical. They didn't need to be filled by others. They needed to hear themselves. And in the silence, they finally did. Silence has a language. It reveals things that words can't. In silence, you begin to notice the subtle truths, the way your body holds tension when you're lying to yourself, the way your thoughts betray your fears, the way your intuition tries to speak but gets drowned out by noise. Most people are terrified of silence because they mistake it for nothingness. But those who choose aloneness know that silence is not empty. It's sacred. It's the space where reality begins to speak. And when you finally listen, you hear things you were never taught to hear. Your own clarity, your own wisdom, your own voice beneath the voices of the world. That's the moment your life begins to change. But here's the brutal truth. Choosing aloneness is an act of rebellion in a world addicted to distraction. Society teaches us that our worth is based on how many people love us, how often we're seen, how connected we appear. But what if real worth comes from being able to stand alone and not flinch? To walk into a room full of people and not need to perform. To sit at home in complete silence and not need to escape. That kind of strength is rare. It's forged in solitude. And that's why the people who always stay alone often seem so strange, because they've stepped outside the game. They're not performing. They're not chasing. They're not pretending. They're simply being. And that kind of authenticity is unsettling to those still trapped in roles. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone? Not scrolling, not distracted, not numbing, just being with yourself. Could you do it for an hour, a day, a week? What would surface? What would you learn? What would you finally feel? This is the invitation that solitude offers, not isolation, not disconnection, but reconnection. Reconnection to yourself. reconnection to life as it actually is, not as it's filtered through noise and performance. And once you taste that kind of clarity, it becomes harder and harder to go back to the shallow end of existence. In the end, the dark truth is also a liberating one. People who always stay alone are not always broken, or strange, or hiding. Some of them are pioneers of the inner world. They've gone where others are too afraid to go. They've chosen depth over distraction, clarity over noise, self over performance. And in doing so, they've discovered something most people miss: that the greatest companionship you will ever find is not in another person, but in the quiet, unwavering presence of your own soul. And once you've met that presence, once you've listened to that silence, you're never truly alone again.